Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. It's delightful actually to see so many people interested in the project. We will be talking about the project overview, what I envision for it, project specs, future research, and I am recording. So this recording will be made available to anyone who is interested in the project and for us as well. If we want to re-review what has been said in the project, I will post a link and share it. For that reason, please be mindful that it is being recorded, so any remarks that you make would be recorded as well. Okay, so Force 136. I have found that the group of Chinese Canadians who served in the Second World War with Special Operations Executive represent a very challenging and unique research proposal. Very few, none, almost none, ever told their families. I believe that all who served in Force 136 are now deceased, and we don't know where most of those records are, or it may be that they left some records and they're just really hard to understand. In this type of research, a background in military or skills in military research is definitely an asset. Library and Archives Canada and or Veterans Affairs World War II records do not hold these records. And the cost to acquire these records from the National Archives, which are actually in Kew in London, is prohibitive. So the reason why I know this is because I have spent some time researching my uncle. I did a presentation for ANAVET's CCMMS January of 2023, where I talked about my research process on how I uncovered my uncle Dick, this is him, in Pune, his secret life as a member of Force 136. This is one of the slides in my show, and it has taken me 15 years to get to this point. What did I know? Nothing. No family stories, not shared by anyone. There were no films or documentaries when I started. There were no books. There were no documents I could find. I had no photos. And I have no military experience. So really nothing. It's a super challenging research project. I had to start with knowing nothing, just basic questions. What was Force 136? What was SOE? Who ran it? What part did Force 136 play in it? Who knew about it? Where are the documents? What is the key number? I don't need to ask all these questions of you or read this entire slide to you, but basically, even creating the questions to figure out what research you are going to do is in itself challenging if you're starting with nothing. I did start with the Chinese Canadian Military Museum. They have a website. I went to the museum, I read the stories and found the names. I also went to the wall in Chinatown where my Uncle Dick and other members of the Yip family are commemorated for their service in the Second World War. Really, the breakthrough for me and Dick's story came when his wife, Yvette, gave to me his records from World War II, none of which I can tell you were Force 136. However, he did have photos, many photos. And it was in scanning them and researching the images in the photos that I finally cracked some of the hidden details in my uncle's time with Force 136. I also acquired his World War II record, which I can attest has nothing for his work with a special operations executive. And since it took me 3 3/4 years to acquire, here's the benefit of my experience and the experience of others. That is not the way to go to find these records. I also used geography. I had to look at maps to find, so for example, I started with this one. Dick annotated it by saying it was a train station. I had to research train stations in India. I finally found what the original names translated to because he used a different name. It was Kalyan Station in India to figure out just even where they were. So that's what he said. This is what I had to do. Uh, This is a photo that Dick annotated with his buddies. Uh, this piece alone was great for research because it proved that Dick was there. It proved the people that were there with him. And this photo, I have since shared high-res images of this one with anyone who's descended from any member of this picture who may have a copy of this picture in their family files, but without the annotation. And honestly, if you didn't know your uncle when he was 20 years old, then you might still not be able to recognize him because you may never have seen him so young and uh, in the prime of life. So this comes to my project idea. What if we were to hire an expert researcher to research at the National Archives in London? And what if we could leverage like existing knowledge together? Then create a community, a group to talk about the research, to ask our questions together, to ask and answer, because I can tell you with Facebook, my Facebook group, Genealogy for Asian Canadians, I have been rewarded. I can't even tell you multiple times over. Like I teach, I share my information, but other people ask great questions. They answer well. They provide many answers. They look at things in ways that I personally would not have thought of or just don't have time to think of. And that is the power of researching in a group. It's not just you. It's just not just your brain and maybe the researcher that you are engaging, but it's also in this group, I want the power of community. I want us to learn together. And so to build and support an environment where all project participants can learn, can ask their questions, and share the costs. As a researcher myself, I can tell you when I'm at the archives, it is almost as easy to research 15 people as one person. You're going through the same files, you're looking at the same things, and just to read through a list of names, just get everything because it's duplicative to do this once or twice or, simply individually. So at this point, I would like to introduce our proposed expert researcher, Colonel retired Chris Weicker. 36 years of military experience in Canada, Germany, and China. Chris holds a master's in history from UVic. He is the author of Secret Warriors in the Pacific War, Chinese Canadians, and the Special Operations Executive, 1944 to 45. Chris is proposing to be our expert researcher, and now I would like to stop sharing and let Chris take over. Chris, I'm going to make you co-host as well here.
Okay. So, hello everyone. I just talk a little bit about myself and how I got to this point of doing this Masters of History in Chinese Canadian history. I retired in 2013, and I went back to university and got a Bachelor's of Art in Pacific and Asian Studies, studied Chinese history, culture, and language. And then I decided to carry on with a history degree in Chinese Canadian history. And my supervisor suggested that this whole idea of what the Chinese Canadians went through prior to World War II and during World War II would be an area of research that hasn't been touched. And so I decided to write my master's on the issue of the Chinese Canadians and how they contributed to the success in the Pacific War. And like Rick said, you need to understand a little bit about the background of SOE, and you also need to know a little bit about the history of the Chinese Canadians and why this was so important to them to get involved in this secret mission. Now, I'm familiar with the fact that my father was in a secret organization in World War II, and to get the files was very difficult. So I did a lot of research in Ottawa, the Library and Archives Canada, and Department of History and Heritage in Ottawa, also the military archives. And all of that pointed to the fact that the files that we needed to see were in England at the National Archives in Kew Garden. So on my own expense, I went to England for a week, got many files about Chinese Canadians. But at that time, my knowledge of SOE was pretty limited. So I got what I thought was important and was able to write my MA, which was good, and I got accepted. Since then, Linda and others have contacted me about the information, and I'm realized that there's probably more files that have the background history of SOE that are still unexplored by researchers. I recently went through the whole what's called Discovery, which is their software to look at files, and I pulled out about 24, 25 files that would be worthwhile looking at because I will probably have history of Chinese Canadians in those files. But to do that, you need to go there. As Mr. Yip said, you have to take a picture of every page, and you're not really sure which is important and what isn't. So when I went in 2019, I took about 2,000 photos and covers about 12 files on Chinese Canadians. That's a little bit of the history of what I did to get this story out to everyone.
You're still muted, Linda.
Thank you. So that's the idea. Everyone here and your family besides is invited to join us in our Genealogy for Asian Canadians Force 136 research project. We would like to send Chris to research on behalf of all of us. Please gather the names of your person of interest. I will take applications until the end of next month, the 30th of September. Chris is proposing that he will research, he will go to London in November. These are unique records for your family that are unavailable largely outside London, UK. They are not digitized, not likely to be. As Chris alluded to, and I think we have mentioned, it is actually very challenging to research military records because you don't know which records are the most important. This isn't really going to be a case where you're going to want any and all mentions of your person in records because it's military. Military is known for one thing, and that is extreme documentation. And so having a person go through and curate the information for us, plus bring it back, we will have access to Chris's research to date, his 2,000 images. Chris is also offering to, for those of us without a military background, explain the terms, the abbreviations, the organization, and I think I will learn just as much as everyone else in this project. I propose that we would have a couple of meetings, group discussions, midway through as we're starting to get our research back about our people so that we can ask and answer some questions about what we're learning. And then at the end, when it's all said and done, we'll have another meeting to again ask and answer some new questions that we'll be learning. Because if anything I've learned about genealogy, it's that you start with 1 or 2 or 3 questions and you end up with about 10 more questions for every question that you started with. So our fees, are probably going to be between 250 and 500 per person. It really depends on how many project participants we get. But that is the end of my spiel for this. I'm going to stop sharing. I will also stop recording. And please feel free to ask any questions at that point.